This is the 5 a.m. Miracle, episode number 458. Productive Parenting, Round 2. Daycare, Healthy Habits, and more with Tessa Sanders. Good morning and welcome to the 5 a.m. Miracle. I am Jeff Sanders and this is the podcast dedicated to dominating your day before breakfast. My goal is to help you bounce out of bed with enthusiasm, create powerful, lifelong habits, and tackle your grandest goals with extraordinary energy. In the episode this week, my wife Tessa and I discuss life as the parents of 2 young kids, how our daily schedules and priorities have changed, and how we are guaranteeing time for ourselves, our health, and our kids. Let's get to it. And we're back here in the 5 a.m. Miracle Studios, and I am with, once again, my lovely wife, Tessa. Tessa, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody.
You know, this is the first time that you and I have had what I'll call, equal microphone setups, which I'm sure technologically is fascinating to you.
Seems the same.
I'm sure the listeners love that as well. But what this means is that you and I are now on equal footing with audio quality. Not that that is like a marriage comment at all. It's just
a metaphor.
It's not symbolic of anything else. I just finally spent the money to give you some equal footing here on your microphone.
Well, I've been on the show a lot, kind of, compared to other people, right?
You've been on the show more than anybody else, and so I assumed, based upon that, you deserved a little bit of an extra cushion.
Well, thank you.
So, welcome to the show officially with the the nicer mic.
Great, happy to be here.
Good. So the topic of today is all about parenting, what I'm calling productive parenting version 2 or round 2 or 2.0. All from the perspective that you were on this podcast earlier this year talking about the birth of our daughter, Rosie, which is our second child. And I had planned to interview you like 3-4 months ago. And then we had some major hiccups with COVID scares, people leaving, me traveling across the globe. And now we're back a few months later. So I actually think now is a better time to discuss where we are, not only because a lot has happened recently, but because we are also now in what I would view a new season for our family that has a very different structure in terms of the way the calendar looks. Our commutes are different. Our daily schedules are different. There's a lot that's new. And so I thought this would be a good time to discuss, I guess, the newness, but also our intentionality behind that, where we are now, what that means for our next season of life, and of course, how that relates back to you, the podcast listener, meaning that when your life shifts to a new season, what that means in terms of how you schedule your life, how you plan it out. So I wanted to break down kind of where we are now, what that looks like, what your experience, Tessa, has been like through that, and then kind of just, see where that takes us in terms of our next season.
Sounds great.
Awesome. What did I say? I think I was trying to say awesome and okay at the same time. Is that a new word? Anyway, awesome.
Are you going to keep that in?
I'm going to keep it in.
Okay.
Because, man.
Because you're so awesome.
I am. And we're not going to edit anything today.
Okay.
All the goofiness will stay.
Okay.
So from that perspective, let's kick this off with before the summer started, we were in a season where our daughter was not yet in daycare. This is Rosie, daughter 2.0, was not in daycare. Take us back to, I guess it would be May of 2022. Where were we as a family then? What were you thinking then? And what has changed since then?
Okay, let me think. So not having daycare was like a real big issue.
Very big
us.
issue.
And
huge.
I think COVID highlighted like the childcare situation in the country, but for us, that didn't really hit home until like around May of last year. So where we live in this part of town, there's just like no daycare spots available. So there are daycares here.
Well, to clarify this, we live in a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, and Nashville as a city has been exploding with growth in the last few years, even during COVID, right? During the entire pandemic, Nashville continued to grow. And what I have seen, at least from what I can tell, our community has been just, it's been exploding with growth as well. So things like daycares have just been maxed out. And we've experienced the full frontal force of that.
Right. And we did IVF, as many of you know, so we knew we were having a baby. So we got on like daycare lists really early. And I think in my mind, I thought, like, since we are very diligent and I have a little daycare spreadsheet and we visited all these places and we're on wait lists and we paid to be on certain wait lists, that then when it came time for Rosie to go to daycare, we would be fine.
Right.
And that time, I had about 3 months off work. I was planning to go back to work March, and still by May, we had nothing.
Right.
As far as, we did have nothing. We had wonderful family members who were sort of taking turns.
We had piecemeal together some solutions, but they were just not great.
Yeah. I mean, they were great for Rosie. I think she got like a whole lot of love that she probably wouldn't have gotten in like a daycare center.
Yes.
And I think, as any of you who've had kids know, you kind of get germs sent home from daycare. So I do think there were some benefits to her for not joining the daycare thing right away. But as far as productivity, I was really thinking we would have 3 months off for maternity leave. I would have 3 months off for maternity leave. And then I would go back to work when she was 3 months old, full time, working at the office 5 days a week. And instead, we kind of went back to what we were doing when the pandemic was sort of new, where we were piecemealing, like, I'm going to work for this many hours and then I'm going to watch her while you work for a couple hours. And then,
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was messy.
Well, it wasn't just messy. I think, I even think about it now, the way you're describing it, I can feel stress in my body coming back up from that season. Like, that's how intense it was, even from my perspective of, I'm a control freak. I have a show about productivity for a reason. Like, I want to know, here's what's going to happen in this order for this reason. And I can predict, even to the day of like today, I can see what's going to happen. I know the schedule for today, maybe in this week. And we were at a season where I couldn't even tell you what was happening in the hour I was in. It just felt so haphazard to me. Right. And I don't want to operate that way. It was really difficult.
Having kids is unpredictable. Like, we know at any moment someone could call and be like, your kid's sick, you got to come get him.
Right.
And so we know that is like just part of having kids.
Yeah.
But it was like so unpredictable at that time that it was really a lot.
But then...
And then...
something magical took place.
We found a daycare.
I say magical. There's a big asterisk there, which is that this daycare is 25 miles away. Not in any way close to where we live. And, well, it's a 25-minute drive. And so about a half-hour drive just to get to this daycare, which is, for most people, that might sound normal. It might sound long. It's hard to say to compare other people's lives, but I can tell you that from our previous experience, all of our daycares and solutions have all been fairly local for us. And this is a daycare that's literally in another city. Yeah. So,
which I think was also because we had this expectation that we would get a spot in one of the 15 daycares that are closer to us.
Which I think that's the issue when you really think about how many possible solutions are nearby, and we have none of them.
How many we pass on the way to get.
We literally drive right by. Yeah.
But it is a lovely little place. So.
Oh, it's great, which we got lucky on that. And so that's starting in June of this year. Rosie began her daycare, and to a certain degree, that's when our new season of life kicked off. But then right away, a week into that, we got a COVID scare in our house, also known as Tessa got COVID.
It wasn't really a scare for me.
It scared me. And so Maisie and I decided to take off and go to Missouri to hang out with my parents for a couple of weeks while we waited for you to recover from COVID, which, as a husband/father, that was a dicey move just to leave you alone with a baby. But
I mean, I'd rather you do that than get COVID yourself.
Correct.
And when you left, you're like, we're leaving, so we don't get it. I was like, that's never going to happen. Like, we've been exposed.
Right.
We've been living together, like, since I had been exposed to it. Like, they're going to get it. They're going to take it to their parents, and everyone's going to get it. And we're all just going to have a little COVID party. And it didn't turn out that way. So
right.
In hindsight, I think we can say, like, maybe it did work.
Well, it did. It absolutely did, which was a magical thing. And then come back from the COVID scare/event, and almost immediately I took off for a 3-week-long trip to Australia, which left you here with 2 kids. Kind of walk me through what that was like for you. Oh, by the way, I went to Australia for my brother's wedding. We got married to a lovely woman named Sarah. who was from Sydney, Australia, and I was the officiant in their wedding, so that was why I was there. But that left you here with the two kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is we just kind of, I don't know why I keep saying like we went back to COVID time, but I think
that's
when
what
we
it felt
were
like.
sort of on lockdown, it sort of taught us how to just like be home all the time. And with two girls and me, and my mom was here for most of it, but largely we just stayed home. Also, I was just coming out of like COVID. So we just kind of went back into like our old routines from 2020 of just staying around the house and having little activities with the girls, around here. And not really going anywhere.
Which is depressing to me, like thinking about that, because like I really viewed that COVID year, 2020 especially, as a fluke. Like this is a one-time thing, we move on. But I felt it just coming back in these little bits and pieces ever since. And it's not gone. And we've raised our two girls essentially in the middle of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Like Rosie's entire life has been there. Maisie, half of her life has been there. Like us as parents, like we know parenting through the lens of COVID, which is really bizarre. And I feel like it's a weird bubble. And I hope that bubble has burst at this point. But that's been our experience so far.
Well, and I think one of the ways I would characterize this season is like work and childcare and personal life or personal time have all just really blended because I'm at home. My identity feels very much as a mother instead of like as my own person.
Right.
And then work is not quite as separate because I'm squeezing it in during the middle of the day or in the evenings or on the weekends or whatever. So, when Maisie was born, I really felt like it was like I have home time where I'm with my baby and then I go to work and when Maisie was born, I wasn't working from home at all. And I was sort of priding myself and like only working at work and then at home being like very fully like present and all that stuff. And I think now I am present with my kids, but I'm also like shifting back and forth doing like work and then trying to squeeze in like a little bit of social time and like me time and like independence time. It's all like very blended together right now.
And the blended nature of that, I think, like as a guy who values boundaries more so than ever, the blended nature of that is frustrating to me for a lot of reasons. I think in part because, like, let's say I go to the gym. Fortunately, at our gym, we have daycare. I chose that gym for a reason because my girls can be there, and they love it. It's great, but it also gives me separation. I can do my workout, and that's all I'm doing. One activity, I do it well, and then I leave. When I'm home, the idea of me doing just one thing doesn't exist. Like it's not a thing that is there anymore, and so I'm literally doing like 8 things at the same time. And it all eventually gets done. So that at the end of the day, you'd say, well, here's the checklist for today. The items got done. Isn't that wonderful? I'm like, yeah, but my experience for that is so different. And one that's, once again, as a guy who wants my life to go a certain way and it's not going that way, the means to the end matter to me. The way that things get done matter. And I'm just in this goofy, fuzzy area of life where the blended nature feels bad. And I want to find a way to have it not feel that way. And I don't have those skills yet, maybe, to cope with that or to figure that out. So it's a challenge.
Well, and I don't think it's just your skills. I think it's partly like where Rosie is developmentally. So like she needs so much attention. And I think what you're wanting and what I want sometimes, and I think what a lot of people, everybody wants at some point, is to like do my own thing. Yeah. I want to do my own thing. And I don't want to think about all these other people who are here, who are impacting my thing. And I think Maisie is to a point where she can be a bit more autonomous depending on what activity she's working on.
Which is very helpful.
But Rosie is still not there. So, one of the things that you talk about a lot is like early mornings. We've had to like really rework our morning schedule so that it works for like the greater good, which is mostly me.
But that's a huge topic we can get to as well. There's a lot to say about our morning routines now.
What?
Do you want to go there now or do it?
I mean, we've gone there.
We're going to go there now. Okay, so this is a fascinating thing. So if you know this podcast well, which you may or may not, morning routines obviously is a central focus of the show, mostly because when I launched this podcast 9 years ago now, my morning routine took a central role in my day in terms of establishing my rhythm, my habits, my ideal day was kicked off because my morning was kicked off well. But now we're in this season where the control that I have has been relinquished and the systems I had in place basically don't exist. And so now it's a very hodgepodge reactive mode that I go into. And I mean, let's just be honest here. Our daughter Rosie has been sleeping in my studio for the last 9 months. Like, she has no bedroom of her own. So every night we put her to bed in a crib in my studio where we're recording right now. And then every morning we take her out and I haul the crib out of the room so I can work. So we've been in this really awkward, just back and forth stage. So when the mornings show up and then Rosie is sleeping and she's asleep till, 6 a.m. now, basically? Let's hope, which means I can't get out of bed before 6 because if I do, it wakes her up early, which wakes you up early, which causes a ripple effect of insanity in the house.
Well, and I think that, as you're talking about the old way, it was like my routine, my morning, my productivity, my habits. And I feel like we've sort of shifted right now to like my routine. Like, I need them to sleep until a certain time so that I can get up and do my morning routine by myself. So that because once they wake up, they're very clingy, needy, and it's hard to like put curlers in your hair or whatever when you have 2 children with you. So it sort of shifted to a phase where like, I need this to go my way for now. And the result of that is that you don't get to like have your sort of ideal morning or your desired routine in the morning, which doesn't feel great to you.
It doesn't, but then let's take this morning as a good example where I woke up basically at the last possible minute and I had the shortest possible routine to get up, get dressed, get Rosie and drive her half an hour away to her daycare and back. And so then my morning routine started when I returned from the morning commute. So instead of me doing it before, now I'm doing it after. So I've been awake for at least an hour and a half and then I began the routine. And so I've just time shifted the same activities and it still works. The same things are still getting done. It's just a different way of doing them. And in part, I feel fine about that because once again, at the end of the day, all the boxes were checked. But the means matter to me too because I know that affects my attitude, affects my energy, it affects my productivity overall. Everything here is connected. And so when I look at my day, I'm always asking that question, like, what's the most efficient, beautiful solution here? And then recently, I've just been racking my brain and being like, I don't see it. Like, it doesn't exist in the way that I want it to. And I think that, to me, is where I kind of get stuck because I'm wondering, am I just going to be here indefinitely?
Forever?
Well, or does it get better? And it does.
Right.
So
that's what I was going to say. Like, what we've realized with kids is, like, they change all the time. What worked 3 months ago doesn't work now.
Right.
And kids change and, sleep patterns change and all that stuff. So, this idea, and I always say this, I'm like, this is going to be this way forever. And you're always the one reminding me, like, it's just a phase. It'll pass.
Yes.
Probably sooner than you
This too shall
want.
pass.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. So yeah, that's basically where we've been then, is looking at this routine from that lens of how do we optimize that aspect. But let's shift now to the commutes, because I feel like that's, I guess, in many ways, the boundaries of the day, because now each of us takes a daughter, we drive all across town, and then at the end of the day, we do it in reverse, and next thing you know, like, our family's back together at the end of the day, but it was all kind of, guarded by those commutes that kind of really set the tone for, here are the hours you have before the commute, the hours between, the hours after, and then how you get things done at any point in time in those open spots, if they're open at all. How's that been for you in terms of the commute and how it's affected, I guess, your work schedule, your routine in general?
Well, it's interesting because I think really like the start of school for Maisie is like our whole schedule is working around like, when does Maisie have to be dropped off at school? And then we sort of backtrack from that to figure out like, then when do we need to do our morning stuff? When do we need to get up? All that stuff, which I guess was happening before when Maisie was being dropped off.
It feels different though, even though it might be the same. Like, you maybe, let's say that you're a listener to this podcast right now and you don't have kids and you think, well, I have to drive to work and home every day. I have a commute every day too. That's true. And I used to have that too. And Tessa has had that for a lot of times too. But there is an emotional like difference in what this thing means, in large part because if I don't drop off the girl, in my case, one of them, you have the other, it dramatically affects my workday. I can't think because there's a crying baby in my house, which is different than like I might be late to the office and tell my boss I'm sorry. Like there's a difference in, I guess, the way that I perceive what the commute is now. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, I think I just view, part of it is I worked from home for a long time. And so I didn't even have a commute for a long time. And now I do again. And that commute is also different because in large part, it feels like I'm just driving nonsensically across town and back. Like it feels like a waste of time. Like productivity wise, I'm like, what am I doing in the car for an hour twice a day?
Right.
2 solid hours a day in the car. There's got to be more to my life than that, right? Like I have this just like nagging feeling of I want more from this, which yes, I listen to podcasts in the car. I also listen to audiobooks and other great things. But there's a big part of me that just feels like, man, I could do so much more with this time if I had it back.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And there's not really a way to fix that. I mean, at least eventually Rosie will go to a different daycare, presumably closer to us.
Yes.
But like Maisie's going to be going to that school until things drastically change for us, if ever. So like, speaking of like the differences between the commutes, like you are driving 20 to 30 minutes each way with a baby in the back. So you're listening to all the stuff. I'm driving 20 to 30 minutes, a commute that I would be making anyway. So in some ways that feels like a bit more like
because Maisie's school is right next to where you are.
Right. Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Not like Rosie's daycare, which is just out in the middle
of
like
nowhere.
But I also feel like it's kind of a waste of time because I'm not able to listen to my podcasts and audiobooks and all that stuff as much because Maisie's in the car and I want to like soak that time up with her and like do something productive, I guess, with her. But like she doesn't want me to like badger her with questions for 30 minutes. So
she's not the best, partner in crime there.
Right. And like, mornings are better than afternoons. But I've been trying to sort of figure out like, is there some programming we can listen to together? Or like, can I have her listening to something while I'm also listening to something? And like, what do we want to do with that? And also like, or should I just like not be trying to make this time productive and let it be more like restful?
Well, I think that's the question that I was asking myself is that if you look at the day as a whole and, these various points where we have like obligations to go to work, to take the girls to daycare, in my case, to go to the gym or have work hours in the middle of the day, the question I'm asking in all of these points in time is what is the ideal here? What am I trying to get from this time? What's practical? What's my personal take on like, I would love for this to happen, but, and with those questions, like I do come up with the best case scenarios, but sometimes they're not that great. Right. Sometimes the ideal is just not fantastic. But once again, back to the idea that this is a season, these things will change. Or there's just parts of my life I'm just going to sacrifice for the greater good of what this means to me overall. And I think that it feels like a loss to me because in the past, I didn't have that time, taken from me, if you want to use that phrase. But now I do. And because I chose to have kids, like I opted into all of this. And so it's just that question of how do I redefine what my life now looks like as a husband, father, homeowner, business owner, keep adding on those titles. But that also means that my life is changing. And what I used to do in my 20s, let's say, is not who I am now. Right. It's not what my life's going to look like going forward. And I think that I still have this emotional attachment to who I used to be and what I used to accomplish. And I think that is something I have to, in many ways, let go of and just acknowledge that season is over. And then looking forward, what is the best case scenario? What do I want out of my life now? And how can I get as close to that as possible on most days?
Well, and I think it's also like I don't want to go too far down that path and just like totally give up like my own identity for the sake of being a mother.
You definitely don't need to either. We're not asking ourselves to give up our identities.
Right.
Like we're not going to walk away and be like Tessa and Jeff as individuals are gone now.
And all I am is a parent.
Right. Which can't be the solution either.
So finding like a balance. And I think because we have really little kids, there's like on the spectrum of like, I don't know, my own identity and my identity as a parent, I'm farther down the parenting
yes,
side.
that pendulum has swung big time for now.
But as they get older, and we've
Yes.
already seen this with Maisie. I mean, it's amazing how many things she can do on her own.
Oh my gosh,
Does
yeah.
she do them? Maybe not, but like she could.
But her like autonomy and intelligence and abilities they've skyrocketed just in the last 6 months, and you can see that. And so we know that like these are seasons that are changing.
Right. It's funny because like I realized like, oh, Rosie's wanting to eat more food, and like if she's going to eat, then like I have to like be really like proactive and thoughtful about that. Whereas Maisie will just go get herself some food.
Right.
And it's kind of, seeing them together now makes me realize really how far Maisie has come when it comes to developing her own identity, and not just as a child, like as our child, but like as her own self, which is, beautiful.
It is. I mean, it's an amazing process to watch, these girls grow up and become individuals. And I guess to that degree, to watch us evolve as adults into our next season. Now, I was talking to, I think it was my brother's in-laws in Australia, looking at their life like as retired adults in another country. I experienced quite a bit in Australia with seeing life through the lens of someone else. And a big part of that for me was then reflecting back on what does that mean and the way that I'm viewing my own life. And to that degree, what I'm asking myself is, if I was older, wiser, more mature, looking back at this season, like what would I, Jeff Sanders, 20, 30 years from now, say to myself now? And I think that I could see that almost in that sense of this is a season, and there's a lot to be valued and gained from this. And I don't want to walk through it day to day feeling as though I'm losing something, but instead the exact opposite. Like there is so much to be gained from this season that I don't want to lose, in large part because we have so many magical moments with our daughters that I know we're going to lose in the future because they're going to grow up and change and leave. Like that's all coming. And so I don't want to ever take that perspective of like, woe is me. This is a hardship on my part. Like there is a lot to be gained here.
I think it is hard to step back though sometimes, but there's so many like movies and books and quotes about like living your life in the present and not like waiting until like, wait until the kids grow up and then things will be better, or wait until you get the dream job or you get the bigger house or you get your office back. It's like, this is your life now. This is our life. And like, this is, like you said, the magical moments are happening like here now with all this like kind of messy chaos. Well,
it's that same quote from Albert Einstein I keep talking about in the podcast. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, right? In the middle of the challenge, there's something to be gained here. And from that perspective, I need to ask that question more. Like, what can be gained here? Because I always get ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's always a solution. There's always some creative avenue I can take that leads to a better end result. And I think sometimes I just get tired.
Right.
I get stressed. Sometimes it's just a lot.
Yeah.
But in those moments where I'm feeling okay, like right now, for example, I could ask those questions and then have a better response. And so I think being reflective enough and aware enough to know that like there is more to this than what I'm seeing.
Yeah. It's interesting too, this idea of like, what would you say to yourself like 10, 20, 30 years, at this time of year? Well, we're heading into the fall, but like I often will read the Christmas Carol in the fall, winter time. And I don't know how much you know about the Christmas Carol, but anyway, he sort of goes back, like he's like kind of traveling back through time to see his like previous self.
Right.
And there's like the ghost of Christmas past and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And anyway, it's all very like kind of looking at your life from a different perspective and like what it was like at that time. And I think it's just a good time to like pause and think like, what would the future me tell me? What would I tell my past version of me?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like that question of like, when were those golden years, the best years? And the only real answer to that is like, I'm living those years out now.
Yeah.
Like in 20 years, I'm going to look back at this season and be like mournful I don't have those again. Like, I know that. Like, I'm going to look back at this and be like, I wish I was younger, prettier, more energetic or whatever I'm going to feel in 20 years. And it's hard to feel that now because I see more wrinkles on my face now than I did 10 years ago. Like, I see myself getting older as opposed to myself like living a life right now that has a lot to be gained.
Yeah.
So, wrinkles. Parenting gives you wrinkles.
Yeah,
it does. Tessa, next topic. What we got?
We want to talk about healthy habits?
In terms of what?
Well, I think, we've talked about all this, like maybe lack of autonomy or shifting habits or changes, but within that, you've been able to like maintain some healthy habits, try some new healthy habits,
that
or
is true.
Even just habits. And I think that also intersects with like maintaining your own identity as like who you are, like Jeff Sanders, the person,
That's
not
a very good
necessarily
point.
the parent.
Yeah.
So like,
well, this goes back to, I did an episode of the podcast, what was it, 6 weeks ago, about smoothies. And one thing that I have taken, even from that own episode where I took the time to make it, was to reflect on my own healthy habits and thinking about what do I eat, when do I eat it, how often do I eat it, what does that mean for my life in terms of when do I prepare food, when do I buy the food, when do I bring it home? There's just practically a lot of questions when you're asking that, like, how do I be my best self every day? Well, I know from my philosophy, a health-first approach to productivity in life means I want to be healthier. And for that to be true, I have to eat well, I need to exercise, I need to sleep well, all of which are challenging with 2 kids at these ages. And so I have to be more intentional than ever to make those things true. And so one thing I did was to integrate a daily smoothie again, bringing it back into my life, but in a more profound way of saying, like, this is a symbolic centerpiece of me making the intentional decision to be healthy today. And knowing that when I do that, later on today, I'll have more energy. Tomorrow, I'm going to feel healthier and better. I'll get sick less often. Like those kinds of thoughts, like really guide me forward and say, I want to make the better choice here with the food. I want to make sure I go to the gym every single afternoon with my daughter because I need that time to move my body because I can't get anywhere else. It's going to happen right there. Like I'm going to force it in and knowing that I'll be better for it. So for me, the healthy habits conversation is much more of a, here are the few pillars of health I want to make sure always happen, and then make sure they happen and stay very diligent to those. And these last few weeks, as I've done that, it absolutely works. Like it has not been difficult. It's actually been way easier than I thought to make those things true. But I had to commit up front to say, here are the few things I'm going to value and sure are happening, and then just go off and do them. And then I'm going to reap the benefits of those things down the road.
Well, and then you systematize it. So, you think, what do I need to put in place? And then you do. And then the next day, you don't have to think about it a million times. Right. Or wonder, like, what am I going to have for my morning snack? Or, like, what am I going to do after I pick them up today?
Which, by the way, episode 457 just last week was all about this topic. So if you want to go into a full deep dive, I break it all down right there.
But I think the big headline here is, like, even within all this messy scheduling stuff, like it's still possible to keep like a few strongholds when it comes to health and wellness. Yeah.
Which, I mean, obviously when you have young kids, you want to be present for them. I know in order for me to be the most helpful for you, to be helpful for myself and for them, like I can't walk into a family experience stressed out, tired, overweight, hangry, sick, thinking about work because I didn't get it done that day, like all those things that could pull me away mentally and physically from that moment. Like I don't want those barriers to be in place. And so if I can knock those things down one at a time, then when those moments show up, I can just be a dad. I can just be a husband. I can just be present and feel good about that and not feel like I've lost something, but instead like I showed up, like, let's do this. Yeah. And that's what I want to feel more often.
Well, and acknowledging you're not going to be able to do all the things you want to do. So to be able to say, like, these are the 2, like, most important things for me or whatever.
Which that was before we had kids. I asked a number of people about, like, what was that shift like for you when you went from a 20-something to then later on having kids and running businesses, and, like, how did your life really change? Or what was the big, shift you made? And across the board, what I heard, which I've now experienced firsthand, is you go from a life where your time is your own and you could have a very long checklist for the day and do all the things and more, to a life where you don't have time for 100 things today. You're going to have time for like 7. And you choose those 7 very wisely, and you filter and you make sure those 7 things matter, and then you do them. And then at the end of the day, you are likely to actually make more forward progress in your life because you're so much more intentional with what you value. You know what you value. You've identified it. And the other stuff you used to do that you thought was important, it just fades away. And you don't miss it because it wasn't actually that valuable. I was just kind of addicted to the checklist or addicted to wanting to just keep moving as opposed to actually valuing the things that I truly value.
Or giving excuses. Like, I think it's so easy for me to just like work into the evenings or onto the weekends or whatever.
Right.
that's my tendency. And I have, in my previous life stages, have been like, I can't not do this. Like, I have to.
Because we're workaholics.
Well, yeah.
We're perfectionists. We're type A high achievers who just want to keep moving. So you and I, the fact that both of us are that way makes this marriage even funnier to me, because we're just both like, we're not butting heads, but we both have this like, here's my list, let's duke it out.
Right.
Who's going to win today? Like, that's just how our marriage works, which is great. It has its advantages, but also I think we're both we could burn ourselves out in that attempt to continue that intensity.
Right. Which I think is one thing that has been really helpful, is that because we're both prone to do that, I think we're also prepared to like pick up the slack. Right. So like when one of us is like, I need to sleep that's my thing. I need to sleep right now. Or when you're like, I need to make some healthy food right now, or I need to go to the gym, or I need to like drink some water or whatever before I can engage with our family time. The other one is like willing to pick up the slack a bit, because we know what it's like to like need to have those things in place, to prioritize those things. And then we also know what will happen if those needs are not met.
It's also really funny. This is on topic sort of, which is that over the weekends, we have someone is always sleeping in this house on the weekends.
I'm a tired person.
Not just you. You're one of them.
Right.
But someone's always taking a nap. And so it's really weird for me, because let's give a good example. Like a random Tuesday, if you're at work, the girls are in daycare, and I'm at home, the house is just mine. Right? I can play music as loud as I want. I can do basically whatever I want.
Be in any room.
I can be in any room in the house for a certain number of hours, and then it's over. And on the weekends, everyone's at home, and everyone has these random nap schedules, and so I can't be loud. I can't use my blender. I can't play music. Like, I feel restricted from doing like Jeff-ish things, which is, it's fine. But I also, that kind of like the letting go aspect of like, I have to be a chameleon and like adapt to whatever's happening next, which is, once again, the kind of a challenge that I'm just randomly having to work through.
Which I think is why the daycare thing like hit us so hard, because we're really relying on that to give us our own space back. Like, I need someone to take this child who's loving and caring and can nurture them, so that I can go do my thing and know that the children are still like well cared for and loved. And I think this whole like me being bitter about childcare is really about me wanting like my own space and time to like do my own thing.
Which I never realized how much I valued autonomy until we had kids. I didn't realize how much I valued alone time. Or like what I used to have was like time in the woods. Like, I'd go hiking, I'd go for long runs, literally running marathons in the woods. And I don't have that time anymore. And when I do get it, it's like this amazing, blissful oasis of like, oh my gosh, it's like a massage. You're just like, I haven't had this in months. It feels so good. Like, that's how I feel when I'm alone. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this moment. It's so beautiful. Not to say I don't enjoy being around people, but like, I think that both of us have learned that we're more introverted than we thought we were. And we value alone time a lot more, not just for the sake of focus and productivity, but for like personal emotional sanity. Like, it's important.
Yeah. Which I think is also like, just we're intentional to say like, I need this to happen. So like, we're going to work with each other to like make it happen.
Right.
To the extent that we can, given our, boundaries or whatever.
Well, that's a huge part of it too, is that we're constantly having to communicate more than before about here's what I need now. Here's what you need now. How can we, compromise and find a solution? There's a lot more of that going on, because before I would just, if I needed time, I would just go take it.
Right.
And talking to you is a waste of time, because I could just go do the thing and that was it.
Right.
But now it's like, I need to have the conversation with you to guarantee it can't happen at all, which is just, the next level of fun. Yeah. So, glory. What else we got?
Okay. That's all I have on my list.
List is done.
Other than when you're going to have Maisie on the podcast.
Oh, good question. Yes, I'm going to have to bring on Maisie and Rosie. Speaking of that, so yesterday, I told you the story, I think yesterday. I was in the car with Maisie on the way to the gym.
Oh, yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast from one of my friends, David Hooper. There you go. Bigpodcast.com. And listening to his show, and Maisie was asking me like, oh, is this an audiobook? And I was like, oh, no, this is a podcast. Daddy records a podcast every week. And she was like, oh, that's a big responsibility. I was like, what? And then she asked me, she was like, can we listen to a phonograph? I was like, who taught you the word phonograph? then she was like, I want some more Cheez-Its. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this daughter is just
all over the place,
everywhere. And like she's filled with intelligence and filled with weirdness, and she's a 4-year-old. That's just what happens. But yes, I want to bring her onto the show now that she is sort of aware of what a podcast even is. I'd like to bring her on and get some recordings there. So you may hear Maisie/Rosie in the future if I can convince them to talk into a microphone.
Awesome.
Good. Well, Tessa, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Our lives are all new. I'll bring you back on sometime in the near future so we can discuss whatever next season shows up, which I think is going to be when Rosie changes daycares. I feel like that's going to be the next big shift because literally there's a daycare being built in our neighborhood and Rosie's on the list to join them the second the building is finished. And so we're just waiting.
But there are staffing issues that are crazy in this part of town, as we mentioned. So it's not like...
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah, we'll see how
there are no guarantees. Goes. That's the thing.
Yeah.
There are none.
That's the thing.
You just roll with it. That's it.
Well, and every great thing has like, what's the opposite of a silver lining? Every gray cloud, I guess, has a silver lining. So like,
right.
We might have a great daycare. It's too far away. We might get one that's closer that like has...
It's not open half the time.
Right. So, with all of that, all of the issues, there are also great things going on.
Yeah, it's a lot, but we're making it work somehow. But yeah, thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
If you want to discuss anything else in the future, you let me know, and you know where I live, so
yeah.
You can come chat with me anytime.
Great.
Good. All right, thank you.
Bye.
And for the action step this week, embrace the season you're in now. Whatever season of life you are in will end, and a new season will begin soon. So let the current season be what it is, and love it for all it's worth. There are opportunities available to you right now, so seek them out, and you will find them. JeffSanders.com/458 is the place to go for the episode notes. And of course, subscribe to this podcast in the app you're using right now, or go to JeffSanders.com/subscribe. That's all I've got for you here on the 5 a.m. Miracle Podcast this week. Until next time, you have the power to change your life, and the fun begins bright and early.